Chapter 7. By the end of this chapter, students will be able to
understand the impact of depressants on the brain, recognize and compare safe behaviors to risky ones, and differentiate between prescription and illicit drugs. Depressants. Depressants are drugs that slow down the central nervous system, or CNS, including our brain and spinal cord and all of its functions. Depressants come in a variety of forms, including prescriptions and illicit drugs. Benzodiazepines are synthetic depressants that produce sedation and slow down the central nervous system. Benzodiazepines, or benzos, can be prescribed to treat short-term anxiety, panic attacks, or insomnia. They are also used to treat muscle spasms and reduce seizures. Benzodiazepines' effect on the mind and body. Benzodiazepines can cause sedation, awareness of what is happening but not caring, and lightheadedness. Benzodiazepines in high doses can cause negative physical and psychological impacts, as well as an overdose. Benzodiazepine withdrawal. A person can become dependent on benzodiazepines if they take them daily for 1 to 2 weeks. This means if someone stops taking them, they will go into withdrawal. Withdrawal from benzodiazepines can be life-threatening, meaning their withdrawals will need to be medically monitored. Here's a list of withdrawal symptoms. Did you know? Mixing alcohol and benzos increases your risk of overdose because both substances are depressants. This means if young people are prescribed benzos for anxiety or insomnia, or they intentionally use multiple substances as part of a larger party culture, they are put at a greater risk for a depressant overdose. Opioids. Refers to opium, opium derivatives, and semi-synthetic substitutes. The different methods of use include ingesting, smoking, sniffing, and injecting. Signs of use include slowed breathing, pupil constriction, and flushed skin. Opioids are prescribed to relieve pain and can cause short-term and long-term effects, which are listed on the slide. Opioids, how do they work? Opioids bind to and activate opioid receptors in the brain and block pain signals sent from the brain to the body and release large amounts of dopamine. Opioids are the only drug to permanently alter the way your brain functions. They are highly addictive, and someone can become addicted as early as the first to third use of the drug, and even if they are taking it as prescribed. If a prescription opioid is cut off by a doctor or a person's tolerance becomes too expensive, many people turn to the cheaper and more widely available heroin or fentanyl. Prescription opioids. Here are some examples of prescription opioids.
Fast fact. Among individuals who began misusing opioids in the 2000s, 75% have reported that their first opioid was a prescription drug. People often assume prescription pain relievers are safer than illicit drugs because they are medically prescribed. However, when used improperly, they can be dangerous, especially when combined with other drugs or alcohol. Research now suggests that the misuse of these medications may actually open the door to heroin use. Your brain does not know the difference between prescription opioids and heroin. Counterfeit pills are fake medications that have different ingredients than the actual medication. Counterfeit pills may contain lethal amounts of fentanyl or methamphetamine and can be extremely dangerous. They often appear identical to legitimate prescription pills, and the user is likely unaware of how lethal that they can be. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid drug that is at least 50 times more potent than heroin and 100 times more potent than morphine. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is most commonly used in medical settings for surgery or for end-of-life care. It's important to note to students that if they were to receive fentanyl in a hospital setting, it is safe and being medically monitored. Illicit fentanyl is both sold alone or is laced into other illicit drugs on the street. Illicit fentanyl replaced heroin in the drug market because its high potency allows traffickers to move much smaller quantities of the drug for people who use it to get the same effect. Illicit fentanyl is a powder created in black market labs and does not require the land or the labor to harvest poppy plants, unlike other forms of opioids such as heroin. Signs that someone is using opioids include: the most obvious sign is pinned pupils. Signs that someone is withdrawing from opioids. The early stages of opioid withdrawal are often described as feeling like allergies. as withdrawal symptoms continue, they begin to feel like a horrible flu. On the slide, there is a list of physical and psychological symptoms. This process usually takes 1 to 3 weeks, and symptoms do not stop until the drug has left the body or the person uses again. In order to finish this chapter, have students take 5 minutes and reflect with their peers to discuss the following prompts. What are benzodiazepines often prescribed to treat? What are opioids often prescribed to treat? Why do people often switch from prescription opioids to fentanyl?